Hey friends, tonight's first topic uncovers a chilling truth about history. For centuries, women's emotions, fears, and struggles with mental health were often twisted, misread, and even punished. From ancient medical theories to Victorian asylums, from the idea of hysteria to dangerous so-called cures, we're about to journey through an unsettling timeline of treatments that were once considered perfectly normal. Before we dive in, take a second to like this video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy the kind of content I make here. And drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. It's always amazing to see this little community come together from every corner of the world. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's settle in for tonight's story. We begin in ancient Greece, the land of philosophers, myths, and surprisingly creative medical theories. Imagine this, it's 400 BCE, and you're a woman who's been feeling unwell for weeks. Your chest feels heavy, your heart races without warning, and waves of panic crash over you. You go to the local healer for help, and after some serious beard stroking, he confidently tells you the cause: a wandering womb. Yes, you heard that right. Hippocrates, the same man remembered for the Hippocratic Oath, truly believed a woman's uterus had a will of its own. If she was too emotional, too anxious, or even too abstinent, her womb might pack up and start wandering around her body like a confused traveler. It could move up toward the chest, down toward the legs, anywhere it pleased. The chaos it caused, dizziness, breathlessness, trembling, was blamed on this roaming organ, and the cure: not a blanket, not rest, not understanding. Instead, doctors would place sweet-smelling herbs near the pelvis and foul odors near the nose, in an attempt to coax the uterus back home. Picture lying there while someone waves burning garlic under your face as if they're performing a for your insides. And in a society where women couldn't vote, couldn't own property, and couldn't even wear trousers, this was considered medicine. Female anxiety wasn't recognized as an emotional or mental reality. It was reduced to nothing more than a misbehaving womb. To be fair, the Greeks were making guesses with the tools they had: brain scans, no knowledge of serotonin, no concept of trauma-informed care, but blaming every feeling on a rebellious uterus. That's like your car breaking down and the mechanic declaring, the cup holder must have wandered off again. The truth is, ancient women were experiencing the same raw human emotions we know today: grief, fear, stress, uncertainty. Instead of being asked how they truly felt, women were handed incense and told their womb had gone astray. And so, the silence began. Not only the silence of misunderstood symptoms, but also of unheard voices. Now, let's shift into ancient Rome, a world of aqueducts, bustling forums, and plenty of progress in plumbing, but not so much in compassion. If you were a Roman woman battling anxiety, there was no therapist to consult, no hotline to call, and definitely no lavender bath bomb to toss in the water supply. Instead, the solution was simple: get married, have a child, or preferably both, and quickly. According to the almost exclusively male medical authorities, your distress came from your uterus being underemployed. They didn't call it anxiety. They named it furor uterinus, which sounds like a legion marching into battle, but actually meant female emotional instability. You cried too often, spoke out of turn, or appeared restless. You weren't considered overwhelmed. You were just failing at your womanly role. The recommended cure? Childbirth. Again and again. One physician, Soranus, who literally wrote the book on gynecology, advised women to avoid strong emotions altogether. In other words, just stop feeling. Problem solved. He also suggested husbands treat their wives with gentleness, which, in Roman terms, likely meant refraining from shouting at dinner. If you were wealthy and showed signs of anxiety, you might be prescribed wine and music. Not the worst remedy, except it still came from the assumption that your womb was malfunctioning like a broken gear in a bakery mill. Poorer women were offered harsher remedies, bitter herbs, spiritual rituals, or nothing at all. Okay? And heaven help you if you dared to question your husband, wept too long after losing a child, okay? Or didn't smile at the right moment. You risked being branded unstable, or worse, accused of being possessed. Nothing says care quite like a priest rattling bones while you cry on a marble bench. So while Rome gave us roads, laws, and architecture, anxious women received only shame wrapped in olive leaves. Their pain was pathologized, moralized, and then dismissed, because no one ever asked what they were truly going through. They only asked when the next baby would arrive. Now we step softly into the Middle Ages, a time of nights, plagues, and a worldview where a woman with anxiety was often believed to have the devil renting space in her soul. Medicine didn't just stall here, it slammed into reverse. The old Greek ideas of the wandering womb still lingered. Now they were infused with holy dread and fiery superstition. Women who trembled, cried, or suffered intrusive thoughts were rarely seen as traumatized. They were considered spiritually corrupted. Clearly, if your hand shook or you wept at night, the explanation wasn't grief, it was demons. The church dominated healing, and healing often meant exorcisms, public shaming, or, in extreme cases, the stake. A woman who heard voices, practiced herbal remedies, or even looked strange at mass could be branded a witch. Anxiety wasn't just misunderstood, it was criminalized. Fear in a woman's body could get her confined to a convent, dunked in a river, or dragged into a trial with evidence like fainting during prayers. Some monasteries and convent infirmaries did try to help, but their care usually meant prayer marathons, strict isolation, and fasting, because apparently low blood sugar was the cure for despair. Diagnostic methods were equally grim. If you fainted, a cross might be pressed to your forehead to see if you flinched, react, and you risked losing your goats and gaining a pyre. It's heartbreaking, really. These women weren't witches, heretics, or sinners. They were human beings in pain. Women trying to breathe through sorrow, to sleep despite dread. But in an age ruled by fear, a trembling woman became a threat, and threats weren't comforted. They were silenced by fire. Then came the Renaissance, the so-called rebirth. Art flourished, science bloomed, literature soared. Everything seemed to be rediscovered, except empathy for women's mental health, which apparently remained locked in some medieval cellar, while Michelangelo carved marble into gods and Da Vinci sketched machines, centuries ahead of their time. Doctors were still wondering why women dared to feel. The villain, still the same, the uterus. Ancient texts returned, polished, and reinterpreted, but they still blamed women's distress on being too female. Anxious, you must be unmarried. Restless, time to conceive. Depressed, leech therapy. Of course, yes, leeches. Or, if you were lucky, cupping, bloodletting, or a steaming poultice pressed to the abdomen. Physicians truly believed balance was the key, and for women, that meant draining them until the body went quiet, or until they fainted from blood loss. The cures included confinement to a dark room for days, or bans on reading, because, heaven forbid, a woman with books might start thinking. Thinking, of course, was hazardous to the womb's stability. Wealthier women were sometimes shipped to the countryside for rest, which often meant being monitored, dosed with herbal brews, and pressured to smile again, or at least to fake it convincingly. The Renaissance adored beauty, harmony, and proportion, but it had no idea what to do with the woman who sobbed through the night or trembled with dread. Her anguish was labeled inconvenient, disruptive, womanly trouble. So it was hushed, draped in silk, locked behind ornate doors. And in those glittering halls, where music echoed and frescoes shone, anxious women paced silently, wondering if perhaps the fault really was within them. Not the grief, not the pressure, not the world, but their very selves. Because, in the so-called Age of Enlightenment, woman's fear was still considered a defect to be hidden, not a wound deserving to be heard. By the 17th and 18th centuries, the world was buzzing with discovery. Telescopes revealed the heavens. Philosophers debated liberty. Newton gave us gravity. Finally, a better excuse for falling apart. But for women, crushed by anxiety, all that reason and rationality did very little to help. Because while the world was busy charting natural laws and debating human rights, your shaking hands and sleepless nights were still tossed into the catch-all bin of female troubles. Physicians, now dressed in powdered wigs and armed with very serious expressions, had begun to explore the nervous system. They even coined a term for women like you, nervous ladies. It sounded almost refined, maybe even genteel. But behind the polite label lurked the same old prejudice. Women were fragile, overly sensitive, and biologically destined for breakdowns. The uterus had finally stopped wandering in the medical imagination. But now the problem was said to be in excess of nerves, too much stimulation, too much imagination. In short, Enlightenment medicine concluded that women were simply too much. If you cried easily, suffered panic attacks, or became overwhelmed, you might be prescribed warm baths, gentle walks, enforced rest, or the era's favorite potion, laudanum, a potent blend of alcohol and opium, dulled the pain, the anxiety, and occasionally your pulse. But at least you weren't complaining anymore. Wealthy women could be sent to nervous retreats where servants waited on them while they were gently discouraged from reading, thinking, or discussing anything unsettling, like their own emotions. Poorer women had no such sedatives. They'd simply endured in silence. And if a woman dared show anger, frustration, or ambition, she risked being labeled not just anxious, but dangerous. Her husband could have her confined with nothing more than a signature. No hearing, no defense, only silence. That was the Enlightenment. Reason and liberty for men, sedation and confinement for women. Philosophers filled libraries with logic, while anxious wives were locked behind doors. So, as the world basked in the glow of discovery, women with anxiety sat in the shadows, medicated, misread, and told their suffering was nothing more than a flutter of delicate nerves. Nothing serious. Breathe, and whatever you do, don't think too hard. Now we move into the 19th century, the Victorian age, where elegance reigned, corsets were rigid, and emotions, especially women's emotions, were considered indecent. Anxiety hadn't disappeared. It had simply been rebranded. Welcome to the era of the rest cure, designed by Dr. Silas Weir Mitchell, a man with an impressive mustache and limited empathy. The rest cure was prescribed to women with nervous disorders. Feeling anxious, exhausted, depressed? The answer: lie in bed for weeks or months. No reading, no writing, no visitors, no talking about your feelings. Just endless stillness, heavy curtains, boiled milk, and the creeping sense you might be losing your mind, which, ironically, you probably were thanks to the treatment. Women were expected to surrender to passivity. To move was rebellion. To think was dangerous. Resist, and you were accused of resisting recovery, which meant stricter confinement. This wasn't fringe medicine, it was mainstream. Charlotte Perkins Gilman endured the rest cure herself and later wrote The Yellow Wallpaper, a haunting story about a woman unraveling in forced silence. Spoiler: it wasn't the wallpaper that broke her, it was the padded cage of neglect. And then there were the asylums. The rest cure didn't fix you. Stone walls awaited. Inside, women faced ice baths, electrotherapy, morphine injections, and days in restraints. Their crime: crying too often, speaking too quickly, or failing to smile. Still, no one asked if she lost a child, suffered abuse, or buckled under impossible expectations. Victorian society demanded angelic calm, and if a woman couldn't deliver it, she was hidden away, quietly, elegantly, tragically. Now we step into the early 1900s. Corsets are loosening, factories are buzzing, and a man named Sigmund Freud has decided most of your problems can be traced back to your childhood or your father. Freud, the father of psychoanalysis, introduced a radical idea. Maybe women weren't suffering from demons or defective wombs. Maybe the mind itself was involved. And in a sense, this was progress. Instead of ice baths or opium, patients were now invited to recline on a couch and speak. Revolutionary, right? But here's the catch: how you were expected to talk. Freud and his disciples often interpreted women's anxiety as the product of repressed desires or unresolved guilt, usually tied to parents or suppressed sexuality, afraid to leave the house. Symbolic, nightmares, metaphors for your mother, panic attacks, likely phallic. While less physically brutal than past treatments, this approach still placed the blame squarely inside the woman. Her mind, her repression, her failings, never her reality, her traumas, or the crushing social demands placed upon her. And if talking didn't make you better, perhaps you just weren't trying hard enough. Maybe you were just resisting the truth. Psychoanalysis caught fire among the intellectual elite. In smoky Viennese salons, doctors filled notebooks while women spoke softly of their dreams and fears, still fighting to be believed, still straining to be heard. It was progress, yes, but fragile progress, because although the iron bars had been exchanged for leather couches, women's anxiety was still filtered through a male gaze, often reduced to lust, longing, or unresolved father issues. The question lingered: could a woman ever simply be anxious without being branded defective? Or would every tear, every tremor, every quiet scream always be pinned to a theory instead of acknowledged as truth? Now it's the 1950s. The war has ended. The grass is trimmed, and dinner is expected on the table by 6 sharp. You're a suburban housewife with painted nails, a perfect smile, pearls at your throat, and your anxiety. But darling, that isn't something we discuss. According to glossy magazines and cheerful radio hosts, everything in your world is picture perfect. So why do you feel like shouting? Enter Mother's Little Helper, a small pill with a big promise.com. First came Milltown, then Valium, sedatives marketed straight at women, especially homemakers who felt overwhelmed, invisible, or quietly unraveling beneath layers of matching Tupperware. Feeling sad, nervous, numb? Just take a pill, dear, and keep smiling for the neighbors. Doctors handed them out like sweets. No one asked about loneliness. No one asked about trauma. No one wondered whether spending every day vacuuming in heels while performing perfection might be unbearable. In a world obsessed with conformity and consumption, a woman's duty was to be happy. And if she wasn't, the flaw was in her, not the role, not the suffocating expectations, not the solitude. Pharmaceutical companies fueled the story with unsettling zeal. One ad showed a woman clinging to a sink with the tagline, "You can set her free, okay? But you can make her feel less trapped." Another promised peace of mind for overburdened wives, the same women holding families together with a smile and an ever-rising prescription for benzodiazepines. By the 1960s, millions of women were medicated, not because they were sick, but because they were exhausted, lonely, grieving, human. And in a culture that denied them permission to be human, sedation became the substitute for support. The pills dulled the pain, yes, but dependency often followed. That part, of course, wasn't advertised. Addiction was hardly ladylike. Too, they smiled, they swallowed, and somewhere beneath the chemical haze, the question burned. What if her anxiety wasn't an illness at all? What if it was a warning, a muted scream from a soul never allowed to speak? By the 1970s, something began to shift. The casserole still steamed, the house still gleamed. But the woman inside had questions. Why am I the only one sedated? Why does my pain earn a prescription? but not a conversation. Who decided I should apologize for my anxiety? The feminist movement was rising, not only with anger, but with clarity. Across campuses and living rooms, women gathered in consciousness-raising circles. They shared stories, compared experiences, and discovered a powerful truth. They weren't alone. Anxiety, women began to realize, wasn't some personal weakness. It wasn't simply hormones or female hysteria. More often, it was the natural outcome of being overworked, dismissed, expected to shoulder endless emotional labor as though it were invisible. Books like The Feminine Mystique by Betty Friedan cracked open the shiny facade of post-war domestic bliss, exposing what she called the problem that has no name. It gave voice to women who felt restless, anxious, hollow, despite having every material comfort society claimed should make them happy. At last, someone said it out loud. It's not in your head, okay? It's in the walls. It's in the expectations. It's in the silence. And once that silence was broken, there was no going back. Women began reclaiming their narratives, okay? They stopped accepting tranquilizers as apologies, okay? They began interrogating the very institutions that had medicalized and pathologized their emotions for centuries. In therapy spaces, a new kind of counselor emerged, one who actually listened, one who didn't assume every panic attack was just a plea for a husband or a baby. Women also entered psychology, psychiatry, and medicine not just as patients, but as practitioners. Of course, it wasn't a flawless revolution. Misdiagnosis was still widespread. Diets hadn't disappeared, okay? And pharmaceutical companies were still profiting. But something fundamental had shifted. Women were speaking, and this time, they weren't being silenced. They were drawing connections between private pain and public structures, between personal struggle and social conditions. They were reframing the story from what's wrong with me to what happened to me. Slowly, unevenly, the world began to shift. 'Cause once women stopped whispering and started sharing, they uncovered something radical. Their anxiety wasn't insanity. It was truth, a voice straining to be heard in a world that never wanted to listen. By the 1980s and 90s, women's anxiety finally had real names. It's not hysteria, not nerves, not she's just tired, but clinical terms: generalized anxiety disorder, panic disorder, PTSD. At last, a medical vocabulary that didn't pin the blame on the womb. Progress, yes, but fragile, complicated progress. Psychiatry was getting sharper, more defined. Taste of that massive handbook of mental health diagnoses kept expanding, and insurance companies were finally covering some treatments. Hit, even as the science advanced, being a woman with anxiety still carried the same old echoes of doubt, dismissal, and stigma. Picture this. It's 1993. You, a woman gripped by panic attacks, heart racing, palms slick, convinced you're dying. You see a doctor, hands you a prescription for Xanax, maybe a brochure, and politely suggests you rest. At least they'd stopped blaming your uterus. Now, they blamed your pace of life. You're working too much. It's just stressed. Have you tried jogging? Yes, therapy was available, if your wallet could handle it. But finding a therapist who didn't assume your anxiety was just being emotional wasn't easy. If you cried in session, you were called fragile. If you didn't, maybe you were avoiding the truth. Either way, your diagnosis came with conditions. Still, for many women, having a name at last was like being handed a mirror after years in the dark. This wasn't weakness. It wasn't failure. It was real. Medications were evolving too. As Cesaria's, names like Prozac and Zoloft became everyday language, sold as sleek solutions for modern stress. And for plenty of people, they worked. But still, no one was digging into the deeper roots. Trauma, history, generational scars. It was more. Take this. Feel better. Move on. Progress, yes, but progress without tenderness. The science had moved forward, but compassion lagged behind. The terms were new, yet the loneliness felt ancient. Even with pamphlets, pills, and labels. The question whispered in the silence, will anyone ever ask why I'm afraid? Then came the 2000s, when flip phones were status symbols. Low-rise jeans baffled logic, and for the first time in centuries, a shift began. People weren't just asking what's wrong with you, but what happened to you. It wasn't loud or radical, no protests in the streets. Instead, it surfaced in TED Talks, memoirs, and therapy rooms. Researchers, clinicians, and survivors started weaving connections long overlooked. Anxiety wasn't just a random glitch in your brain chemistry. Sometimes it was the body's rational response to a life heavy with harm. And 3 words began to matter: trauma-informed care. Instead of treating anxiety like a defect, this approach asked larger questions. What experiences shaped your nervous system? What patterns is your body still trying to survive? What if your hyperalertness isn't irrational, but learned? So it wasn't abstract. It was deeply personal, especially for women, because now anxiety could be traced to realities no one wanted to discuss: abuse, neglect, generational burdens, harassment at work, the crushing duty of looking perfect while quietly breaking. For many, this shift was liberating. Their fear wasn't a flaw, it was a wound, and wounds could heal, but it wasn't some magical cure. Society still prized productivity over peace. Women were still expected to be steady, capable, graceful, even while managing households, jobs, children, and the endless stack of mental health buzzwords: burnout, imposter syndrome, high functioning, anxiety, new names, but the feelings were familiar. Therapy was more visible, but still uneven, costly, inconsistent. One therapist might truly hold space, another might offer shallow advice and a forced smile. And then came social media. It was both lifeline and landmine. Women could share their pain and find community across the globe, but they could also be dismissed with shallow fixes. Drink more water, meditate, be grateful. Quick slogans instead of addressing years of systemic wounds. And yet, a shift was happening. The world was finally beginning to recognize what women had always known. Anxiety wasn't weakness. It was history etched into the body, waiting for someone to listen. Now we step into the era of Wi-Fi, wellness influencers, and phones that never stop buzzing. Welcome to the digital age, where women's anxiety no longer requires a doctor's signature, only a screen. You wake up to 37 notifications, for emails to calendar reminders. Get a text from someone who just wants to pick your brain. You haven't even had coffee, but your heartbeat is already sprinting. In the digital world, anxiety isn't just internal, it's constant, interactive. You're expected to stay available, efficient, hydrated, emotionally steady, and glowing, all while curating a flawless persona on platforms ironically called social. The modern woman isn't just living her life, she's managing a brand. And strangely, anxiety has become both a warning sign and an aesthetic. Posts that read, "My anxiety is bad today," can trend, as long as they repaired with the right filter and a caption that is self-aware but never too raw. Vulnerability is marketable if it's polished. And if you try to step away, good luck. The world doesn't pause. The algorithm punishes silence. Emails pile up like shame. Even meditation becomes performance, tracked by an app and graded by your smartwatch. So anxiety is everywhere, and so is advice. Scroll for 30 seconds and you'll find reels promising to reset your nervous system in under a minute. Breathwork, matcha, journaling, tapping, all useful tools until they become another box to tick off an already crowded list. At the core, the trigger for women's anxiety hasn't changed much. Pressure. The pressure to be liked, to succeed, to stay fit, ethical, efficient, witty, but not too witty. And never forget to respond to your boss, your friend, your family, group chat that somehow never sleeps. No wonder your chest feels heavy. In an age where you're expected to be on 24/7s, Stillness feels suspicious, and rest feels rebellious. But here's the quiet truth. Anxiety isn't a malfunction. It's a signal, a reminder that your nervous system wasn't built for this much noise. After centuries of being silenced, sedated, dismissed, and now scrawled into exhaustion, something unexpected is emerging. Women are slowing down, not because the world has relented. It hasn't, but because many are realizing that sprinting toward impossible standards only leads to one destination: burnout wrapped in existential dread. In corners of the internet, in yoga studios, living rooms, in therapy circles, a softer revolution is underway. It isn't loud. It doesn't trend. It doesn't wear coordinated athleisure or quote productivity gurus. It just rests. Rest as resistance. Rest as reclamation. Rest as the long-forbidden medicine women were denied for centuries. Not the enforced stillness prescribed by Victorian doctors, but chosen rest. The kind that says, I don't owe anyone my exhaustion. Women are learning to say no, not as failure, but as boundary. It's canceling plans, logging off, leaving the dishes in the sink. And, to their surprise, the world keeps turning. It's not effortless. The guilt still whispers, you should be doing more. But now, a second voice is rising to meet it. A quieter one. You've done enough. Breathe. Communities are forming around this truth. Women holding space for one another without judgment, saying me too instead of why can't you just push through. Together, they're rewriting the story, one exhale at a time, learning that healing isn't linear. Some days you'll journal, meditate, and go for a walk. Other days you'll cry into your cereal and delete your calendar. Both are valid. And maybe, just maybe, anxiety doesn't mean you're broken. Maybe it means you're awake in a world that keeps trying to numb you. So tonight, if your thoughts won't stop racing or your chest feels heavy, remember, you are not a machine. You never were. Then, in a culture that worships hustle, perfection, and productivity, choosing to rest, truly rest, isn't weakness. It's wisdom. Ancient, sacred, revolutionary. Proof that your story was worthy of pain and permanent enough to live just beneath the surface of the skin. As we shift eastward, the story of tattooing takes on a more complicated shape. It's one of beauty and punishment, honor and shame, all inked into flesh. In ancient China, tattoos carried a heavy stigma. Rather than symbols of spirituality or strength, they were often marks of disgrace. Criminals were tattooed on the face or neck with words like thief or traitor, permanent reminders to society of what that person had done and who they would never stop being. It was called chipe branding. 4. Exile. Your punishment didn't end with your sentence. Exile. It stayed on your skin for life. And yet, even here in the shadows of shame, tattooing held deeper layers. Some Chinese warriors voluntarily wore ink to show loyalty to their brothers or devotion to a cause. In the legendary novel Water Margin, one of the 108 heroic outlaws is said to have an entire body tattooed with imagery of dragons, tigers, and flames. A man's honor written on his skin like scripture. In Japan, the story is just as layered, maybe more. Early Japanese tattoos called irimi were used to ward off evil spirits, protect fishermen, or even symbolize status. But as in China, tattoos also became tools of punishment. Criminals were marked with lines on the arms or symbols on the forehead. In some regions, each crime added another stroke, a tally of dishonor visible to all. But over time, something changed. By the Edo period, 1600s, 1800s, full-body tattoos began to emerge as an underground art form. Vibrant, elaborate designs, dragons, coyish, gods, demons began to stretch across the backs, arms, and legs of commoners. These weren't criminals. These were firemen, laborers, and gamblers, men with dangerous jobs and even more dangerous reputations. And then came the Yakuza, Japan's feared crime syndicates who embraced full-body iris as symbols of strength, loyalty, and fearlessness. The more coverage, the more respect, and the more pain you endured. These weren't tattoos for the public. They were private, hidden beneath suits, revealed only in baths or in battle. In both China and Japan, tattoos lived in tension, art and punishment, identity and exile, a constant dance between pride and shame. Because sometimes the ink that marks you also defines you. In ancient Europe, tattoos walked a thin line between power and punishment, depending entirely on who held the needle and who bore the mark. This began with the Celts and the Picts, tribal peoples who lived in what is now Britain and Scotland. When Roman soldiers first encountered them, they were stunned. These warriors, some naked, some cloaked in wolf pelts, were covered in swirling blue tattoos. Fierce spirals and knots etched across their faces and bodies. The dye, woe, a plant-based ink that stained the skin deep blue like thunderclouds rolled across flesh. These weren't decorations. They were battle armor, intimidation, identity. Temple and temples apparently were best left unpainted. Deep in the forests and along the misty moors, the old traditions lived on. Whispered through generations, passed from mother to daughter, warrior to warrior. Because long before ink was criminal, it was tribal. And in the blood-soaked soils of ancient Europe, tattooing was proof you belonged to your people, to your land, to your gods. As Europe entered the long stretch of the Middle Ages, tattooing faded from the spotlight, but it never vanished. It simply went underground. The Christian Church, now a dominant force across the continent, condemned millennia, cooks, sailors, fascinated by the bold patterns and meanings of the tattoo, began getting inked themselves. It was exotic, dangerous, and rebellious, all the things a bored sailor craved. From there, tattooing spread through the ports like spilled rum. Sailors began crafting their own tattoo culture, part survival, part tradition, and part bragging rights. A ship's anchor on the forearm meant you'd crossed the Atlantic. A turtle, you'd crossed the equator. Officially, a shellback, okay? Pig and rooster on your feet, okay? A charm to protect against drowning, because, oddly enough, those animals were often the only ones to survive shipwrecks, floating safely in their wooden crates. Each tattoo had meaning, though the meanings often changed with the tides. An image of a dagger through a heart might mean lost love, or just a rough night in a Caribbean tavern. Hold fast across the knuckles was a prayer for grip, not on life, but on wet rigging in stormy seas. Tattooing became an unofficial language among sailors. No matter your flag, your mother tongue, or your luck with rum, ink could tell your story. It was shared identity in an ocean of loneliness. In desired towns like New York, London, and Lisbon, tattoo parlors began to appear. Small, smoky rooms filled with ink pots and tales from faraway lands. These weren't the artists of sacred temples. They were former sailors themselves, often using homemade needles and gunpowder soot. But for men who faced drowning, disease, and mutiny, a little pain for a permanent memory didn't seem so bad. Tattoos became keepsakes, confessions, maps of the places you'd been, and the parts of yourself you couldn't leave behind. In an era when most people's stories faded with time, sailors wrote theirs in ink and let the sea carry them into legend. By the late 19th century, tattooing was no longer just the mark of the sailor or the outsider. Thanks to a spark, quite literally, from electricity, tattoos were stepping into the modern world. In 1891, Samuel O'Reilly, a New York-based tattooist, filed a patent for the first electric tattoo machine, inspired by Thomas Edison's electric pen. O'Reilly's device allowed for faster, more precise work, and with far less blood. Suddenly, tattoos could be done in hours instead of days. Pain was still part of the package, but now the process felt less like surgery and more like art. And with this came a new era, the tattoo as performance. Circus sideshows and dye museums began to feature tattooed men and women as curiosities at a cost. There was Captain George Constantinus, tattooed Greek prince whose entire body was covered in intricate Eastern designs, and Nora Hildebrandt, one of America's first tattooed ladies, whose ink was matched only by the dramatic and likely fabricated tale of her captivity and forced tattooing by a savage tribe. These performers weren't just oddities, they were living exhibitions. Their bodies became walking stories, drawing crowds and challenging Victorian ideas of propriety, especially when a woman removed her sleeves and revealed a serpent curled around her shoulder. Yet, tattoos remained taboo among respectable society. If you had ink, it meant something. You'd been to war, to sea, to jail, or you'd run away with the circus, okay? And yet, behind closed doors, the elite were quietly getting tattooed too. It's said that both King Edward VII and his son, the future George V, had tattoos, one with the Jerusalem cross, the other with the dragon etched in Japan. Aristocrats in Europe and even some American high society figures began to explore the novelty of body art discreetly, privately, always with plausible deniability. Tattoo parlors flourished in port cities, but now they began appearing in urban centers, too. Small studios tucked between barbershops and billiard halls. And while most artists were still men, women were beginning to enter the craft, needle in hand. The ink was spreading, no longer just a mark of rebellion. It was becoming a medium for memory, identity, or simply the thrill of wearing something no one could take away. As the 20th century marched forward with skyscrapers, revolutions, and wars, tattoos continued their quiet evolution, but not always in the light. Behind prison walls, in locked cells, and concrete yards, a new language of ink was being written. Not on paper, but on skin. Okay. These weren't polished studio tattoos. They were handmade, raw, created with contraband needles, guitar strings, melted plastic, and ink brewed from soot and toothpaste. Painful? Absolutely. Precise? Rarely. Meaningful? Always. In prisons across the world, from Russia's gulags to American penitentiaries, tattoos became a secret code. Every image told a story. Every placement carried weight. A spider web on the elbow, time served, a teardrop near the eye, a life taken or a life lost. 5 dots on the hand, 4 corners, and 1 in the center meant I am surrounded. In Soviet prisons, tattooing became a detailed system of status and survival. A cathedral inked across the chest could signal years behind bars. Each dome a sentence, stars on the shoulders, a high-ranking inmate not to be disrespected, but faking a rank through ink that could get you killed. These tattoos weren't just decoration. They were armor, a resume, a warning, a prayer. In the United States, prison tattoos carried similar weight. Gang affiliations, racial lines, territorial claims, and personal losses. The tattoo gun was often a shared tool. The ink passed between inmates like contraband communion. For many, their first tattoo wasn't a choice. It was a rite of passage. But even outside the walls, these prison-born styles began to leak into the wider world. Artists, especially in urban areas, began incorporating the stark, bold lines of prison art into their own work. What started as survival behind bars became a style replicated in shops, immortalized in movies, and echoed in street culture. Still, the stigma clung. Visible tattoo, especially one on the hands, neck, or face, often meant closed doors, judgment, suspicion. The ink might fade, but the assumptions remained. Yet, for the ones who wore them, those marks weren't shame. They were stories of survival, of time endured, of identity carved in silence, because sometimes, when no one listens, the skin speaks. By the dawn of the 21st century, tattoos had undergone their greatest transformation yet, from ancient rite to outlaw code to something else entirely, a canvas for the self. What was once hidden under sleeves or spoken in hushed judgment was now proudly displayed on runways, in boardrooms, and across social feeds. From baristas to CEOs, kindergarten teachers to veterans, ink was no longer a symbol of rebellion. It had become a declaration of identity. The rise of tattoo studios mirrored this shift. It's no longer backroom shops with flickering neon signs. Many became sanctuaries of expression, clean, curated, and often more like art galleries than the gritty dens of old. Tattoo artists became celebrities in their own right, with portfolios, wait lists, and fans who flew across countries just to sit in their chair. Styles exploded. Watercolor tattoos, fine line, minimalism, realism so sharp it looked like photographs, sacred, geometry, cultural revival, portraits of pets, loved ones, even entire life stories in spine to spine. Technology helped. Machines became quieter, needles finer, ink safer, healing faster. Beneath the aesthetics, the old reasons remained. People still came for the same things they always had. Memory, mourning, power, rebirth. Some tattoos marked milestones, a birth, a death, a beginning. Others covered scars, both visible and hidden. Some people tattooed themselves after escaping abusive relationships. Some honored ancestors, but space exploration continued, driven by a shared desire to learn, to grow, and to push the boundaries of what was possible. The era of government space agencies, defined by the space race and Cold War competition, began to give way to a new age. One that increasingly saw the involvement of private companies and international collaboration. The end of the Cold War had shifted the focus away from rivalry, but space exploration remained as captivating as ever. In the 1990s, the International Space Station ISS began to take shape in low Earth orbit. Launched in 1998, the ISS represented a groundbreaking collaboration between the United States, Russia, Canada, Japan, and Europe. The station became a symbol of what the world could achieve together, transcending the nationalistic ambitions of the past and placing scientific research above competition. It became humanity's largest and most complex space laboratory, orbiting Earth at a speed of over 17,000 miles per hour with astronauts from different nations, living and working in space for extended periods. While the ISS continues to serve as a hub for international cooperation, scientific research, and technological innovation, also laid the groundwork for a new direction in space exploration, the privatization of space. Enter SpaceX, founded by entrepreneur Elon Musk in 2002. Musk's vision was clear: to reduce the cost of space travel and make it possible for humans to live on other planets, particularly Mars. SpaceX's success in developing reusable rockets revolutionized space travel. In 2012, SpaceX's Dragon capsule became the first privately built spacecraft to deliver cargo to the ISS. In 2020, SpaceX achieved another milestone when its Crew Dragon spacecraft carried astronauts to the ISS, marking the first time since the Space Shuttle's retirement that American astronauts were launched into space from U.S. soil. SpaceX wasn't the only private player. Companies like Blue Origin, founded by Amazon's Jeff Bezos, and Virgin Galactic, founded by Sir Richard Branson, have also made significant strides in commercial space travel, focusing on suborbital flights for tourists and research. These companies are not just changing the business of space, they're redefining what's possible for private citizens to experience in space. The future of space exploration now includes plans for lunar colonies, Mars missions, and commercial space stations, with companies like SpaceX and Blue Origin developing the necessary infrastructure to make interplanetary travel a reality. In 2021, SpaceX's Starship completed successful test flights designed for deep space missions. NASA, too, has partnered with private firms to build the Artemis lunar program, which aims to land humans on the moon once again, with plans for a sustainable presence by the 2020s space. Once the domain of only the world's greatest superpowers, is now an accessible frontier for many nations and private companies. The dream of exploring Mars, of establishing a human presence on other planets, is no longer just the stuff of science fiction. It is the next great leap in human ambition. And just like during the space race, the stars are calling once again. In the vast, sun-baked expanse of Egypt, where the golden sands stretch endlessly beneath a blazing sky, there lies a mystery, a lost wonder of the ancient world. A place so incredible that, according to the great historian Herodotus, it was more magnificent than even the great pyramids of Giza. It was called the Labyrinth, an enormous underground complex unlike anything ever seen before, stretching far beneath the earth and the monuments of Egypt. The Egyptians themselves described it as a marvel of both architecture and ingenuity. Labyrinthine structure so intricate it defied the imagination. Herodotus, the Greek historian who traveled extensively in the 5th century BC, was one of the first to write about this astonishing sight. In his travels, he was brought to Egypt, where he had the opportunity to see the labyrinth firsthand. What he witnessed left him in awe. According to his writings, the structure was composed of vast chambers, intricately designed corridors, and towering walls, far surpassing the grandeur of any known structure at the time. It wasn't just a building. It was a labyrinth of monumental proportions, filled with secrets and hidden spaces. The labyrinth, Herodotus described, consisted of 12 immense courtyards surrounded by high stone walls. Inside the chambers were filled with carvings, statues, and inscriptions depicting the gods and the kings who had ruled Egypt throughout the ages. And perhaps most intriguing of all, Herodotus wrote of the structure's sheer size, not just a few rooms or passageways, but a sprawling complex stretching over vast areas. Herodotus claimed the labyrinth was so large and complex that it was impossible to explore it fully. He even compared it to the pyramids themselves, noting that it was more wondrous and impressive. But like so many ancient marvels, the labyrinth soon faded from view. Hidden beneath the sands of Egypt, over time, the labyrinth became a legend. Despite its immense significance, it disappeared from history, buried beneath the shifting desert sands, as though the land itself had swallowed it whole. Today, scholars and archaeologists continue to search for the lost labyrinth, hoping to uncover its secrets and unlock the mysteries that have remained hidden for centuries. The labyrinth that Herodotus described was not just a building. It was a masterpiece of design, one so intricate that it seemed to stretch the very limits of human ingenuity. According to his account, the structure was more than just a collection of rooms or passageways. It was a vast, sprawling complex. Its scale and complexity a testament to the ancient Egyptians' mastery of architecture and engineering. Herodotus famously noted that the labyrinth consisted of 12 courtyards, each one separated by towering stone walls that encased the labyrinth like a series of fortress-like enclosures. These walls were adorned with intricate carvings and scenes depicting the gods, the kings, and the mythological creatures that populated Egyptian beliefs. Some of these depictions were said to be so detailed they appeared almost lifelike, a breathtaking blend of art and architecture. What made the labyrinth so unique was its sheer scale. Herodotus described the labyrinth as having a vast network of interconnected chambers, some so large they could house entire villages within their walls. T went on to compare it to the pyramids in terms of magnificence. Though, unlike the pyramids, which had a singular focus, the labyrinth seemed to hold endless secrets, each turn, each passageway, leading to another mystery. Herodotus also noted the astonishing number of statues within the labyrinth. These statues were not just simple representations. They were said to be works of immense artistic skill. Some of these statues were crafted to resemble the gods of Egypt, while others were of the pharaohs themselves, immortalized in stone. One particularly striking description involved a colossal statue of the god Osiris, which towered over the labyrinth's central chamber, serving as a constant reminder of the divine presence that pervaded the entire complex. Each mission reinforced the U.S. position as the undisputed leader in space exploration. But while Apollo was successful, it came at an immense cost, both financially and in terms of human lives. The program had consumed resources and attention, and by the early 1970s, political support for further lunar missions began to wane. The Cold War was still intensifying, but the urgency to outdo the Soviet Union in space was fading. As a result, the Apollo program was abruptly cut short after Apollo 17 in 1972. The immediate focus of space exploration shifted. The SkyApp program, launched in 1973, was America's first space station where astronauts lived and worked for extended periods, conducting experiments in microgravity. SkyApp demonstrated the viability of humans living in space for extended periods, laying the groundwork for future space stations and deep space missions. Meanwhile, the Soviet Union, despite its initial successes, began to slow its space efforts. Although it had succeeded in sending the first human into space, the USSR never managed to land on the moon. The race was won, but the Soviets continued with unmanned missions to explore Venus and Mars, and even launched their own space station, Program Salute, which eventually led to Mir, a massive orbital research station that became a symbol of Soviet scientific ambition in space. But it was the Space Shuttle program that would define the next era of space exploration. Launched in 1981, the shuttle was designed to be reusable, allowing for multiple missions with the same spacecraft. The shuttle era promised greater accessibility to space, enabling regular cargo and crew missions to low Earth orbit, and eventually the construction of the International Space Station. Despite the promise of these new frontiers, the early shuttle flights were fraught with challenges, and the tragic loss of Challenger in 1986 reminded the world of the risks involved. Space exploration continued, driven by a shared desire to learn, to grow, and to push the boundaries of what was possible. The era of government space agencies, defined by the space race and Cold War competition, began to give way to a new age. It's one that increasingly saw the involvement of private companies and international collaboration. The end of the Cold War had shifted the focus away from rivalry, but space exploration remained as captivating as ever. In the 1990s, the International Space Station ISS began to take shape in low Earth orbit. Launched in 1998, the ISS represented a groundbreaking collaboration between the United States, Russia, Canada, Japan, and Europe. The station became a symbol of what the world could achieve together, transcending the nationalistic ambitions of the past and placing scientific research above competition. It became humanity's largest and most complex space laboratory, orbiting Earth at a speed of over 17,000 miles per hour, with astronauts from different nations living and working in space for extended periods, while the ISS continues to serve as a hub for international cooperation, scientific research, and technological innovation. It's also laid the groundwork for a new direction in space exploration, the privatization of space. Enter SpaceX, founded by entrepreneur Elon Musk in 2002. Musk's vision was clear: to reduce the cost of space travel and make it possible for humans to live on other planets, particularly Mars. SpaceX's success in developing reusable rockets revolutionized space travel. In 2012, SpaceX's Dragon capsule became the first privately built spacecraft to deliver cargo to the ISS. In 2020, SpaceX achieved another milestone when its Crew Dragon spacecraft carried astronauts to the ISS, marking the first time since the Space Shuttle's retirement that American astronauts were launched into space from U.S. soil. SpaceX wasn't the only private player. Companies like Blue Origin, founded by Amazon's Jeff Bezos, and Virgin Galactic, founded by Sir Richard Branson, have also made significant strides in commercial space travel, focusing on suborbital flights for tourists and research. These companies are not just changing the business of space, they're redefining what's possible for private citizens to experience in space. The future of space exploration now includes plans for lunar colonies, Mars missions, and commercial space stations with companies like SpaceX and Blue Origin, developing the necessary infrastructure to make interplanetary travel a reality. In 2021, SpaceX's Starship completed successful test flights designed for deep space missions. NASA, too, has partnered with private firms to build the remedies lunar program, which aims to land humans on the moon once again, with plans for a sustainable presence by the 2020s. Space, once the domain of only the world's greatest superpowers, is now an accessible frontier for many nations and private companies. The dream of exploring Mars, of establishing a human presence on other planets, is no longer just the stuff of science fiction. It is the next great leap in human ambition. And just like during the space race, the stars are calling once again. The vast, sun-baked expanse of Egypt, where the golden sands stretch endlessly beneath the blazing sky, there lies a mystery, a lost wonder of the ancient world. A place so incredible that, according to the great historian Herodotus, it was more magnificent than even the Great Pyramids of Giza. It was called the Labyrinth, an enormous, underground complex unlike anything ever seen before, stretching far beneath the earth in the monuments of Egypt. The Egyptians themselves described it as a marvel of both architecture and ingenuity. A labyrinthine structure so intricate it defied the imagination. Herodotus, the Greek historian who traveled extensively in the 5th century BC, was one of the first to write about this astonishing sight. In his travels, he was brought to Egypt, where he had the opportunity to see the labyrinth firsthand. What he witnessed left him in awe, according to his writings. The structure was composed of vast chambers, intricately designed corridors, and towering walls, far surpassing the grandeur of any known structure at the time. It wasn't just a building, it was a labyrinth of monumental proportions, filled with secrets and hidden spaces. The labyrinth, Herodotus described, consisted of 12 immense courtyards, surrounded by high stone walls. Inside the chambers were filled with carvings, statues, and inscriptions depicting the gods and the kings who had ruled Egypt throughout the ages. And perhaps most intriguing of all, Herodotus wrote of the structure's sheer size, not just a few rooms or passageways, but a sprawling complex stretching over vast areas. Herodotus claimed the labyrinth was so large and complex that it was impossible to explore it fully. He even compared it to the pyramids themselves, noting that it was more wondrous and impressive. But like so many ancient marvels, the labyrinth soon faded from view, hidden beneath the sands of Egypt. Over time, the labyrinth became a legend. Despite its immense significance, it disappeared from history, buried beneath the shifting desert sands, as though the land itself had swallowed it whole. Today, scholars and archaeologists continue to search for the lost labyrinth, hoping to uncover its secrets and unlock the mysteries that have remained hidden for centuries. The labyrinth that Herodotus described was not just a building. It was a masterpiece of design, one so intricate that it seemed to stretch the very limits of human ingenuity. According to his account, the structure was more than just a collection of rooms or passageways. It was a vast, sprawling complex. Its scale and complexity a testament to the ancient Egyptians' mastery of architecture and engineering. Herodotus famously noted that the labyrinth consisted of 12 courtyards, each one separated by towering stone walls that encased the labyrinth like a series of fortress-like enclosures. These walls were adorned with intricate carvings and scenes depicting the gods, the kings, and the mythological creatures that populated Egyptian beliefs. Some of these depictions were said to be so detailed they appeared almost lifelike, a breathtaking blend of art and architecture. What made the labyrinth so unique was its sheer scale. Herodotus described the labyrinth as having a vast network of interconnected chambers, some so large they could house entire villages within their walls. Hay went on to compare it to the pyramids in terms of magnificence. Though, unlike the pyramids, which had a singular focus, the labyrinth seemed to hold endless secrets. Each turn, each passageway, leading to another mystery. Herodotus also noted the astonishing number of statues within the labyrinth. These statues were not just simple representations. They were said to be works of immense artistic skill. Some of these statues were crafted to resemble the gods of Egypt, while others were of the pharaohs themselves, immortalized in stone. One particularly striking description involved a colossal statue of the god Osiris, which towered over the labyrinth's central chamber, serving as a constant reminder of the divine presence that pervaded the entire complex. Perhaps the most fascinating aspect of Herodotus' account was his description of the labyrinth's layout. The rooms and passageways were not just haphazardly arranged. They were designed to confuse, to create a sense of mystery, a true labyrinth in every sense of the word. Herodotus said it was impossible to explore the entire structure in a single visit. It was too vast, too intricate. He ended his description with an air of awe, noting that the labyrinth was a permanent wonder, one that would stand for millennia, or so it seemed at the time. But despite the grandeur of Herodotus' account, the labyrinth was lost to history, hidden beneath the sands of Egypt. A mystery waiting to be rediscovered. The legend of the lost labyrinth has haunted historians, archaeologists, and treasure hunters for centuries. But despite Herodotus' vivid description of the magnificent underground complex, the labyrinth's exact location remains a mystery. Scholars have long debated where it might be hidden beneath the Egyptian sands, and whether it still lies intact beneath the layers of time and shifting dunes. Most agree that the labyrinth was most likely situated near Lake Moeris, an ancient artificial lake in the Egyptian desert near the Fume Oasis, about 60 miles south of Cairo. Herodotus himself had mentioned this location as the site of the labyrinth, linking it to the impressive structure built by the pharaoh Amenhotep during the 12th dynasty around 1800 BCE. The Fume Oasis, with its fertile lands and proximity to the Nile, had long been a thriving area of Egypt, and many believed that the labyrinth was part of a larger temple complex. This complex might have been dedicated to the god crocodile Sobek, whose ancient cult was centered around the area. Some theories even suggest that the labyrinth was built as a temple to Sobek, perhaps to honor his association with the Nile and its cycles. Over the years, various attempts to locate the labyrinth have been made, but the shifting desert sands have provided little in the way of concrete evidence. In the 19th century, British archaeologists and explorers led expeditions into the Fume region, but they came back with only fragmented remnants and unclear artifacts. They found some curious ruins, large rectangular stone structures, which some believed might have been part of the labyrinth's walls. But these findings were inconclusive, and no one has yet identified a definitive structure connected to the labyrinth itself. In modern times, technologies such as satellite imagery, ground-penetrating radar, and drones have provided new hope for discovering the labyrinth. The desert is still vast, and the sand continues to shift and bury anything that might lie beneath. In recent years, some researchers believe they may be closing in on the labyrinth's location, suggesting that the complex could be buried beneath what appears to be a series of vast, unexplored ruins near the Fume. Still, the labyrinth's exact location remains elusive, and the possibility of it still being hidden beneath the sand is both tantalizing and frustrating. As with many great mysteries of the ancient world, the lost labyrinth calls out to those who dare to uncover its secrets. The question is not only where it lies, but what treasures or even secrets it might still hold within its walls. The lost labyrinth of Egypt was not just a monumental structure. It was part of a much larger symbolic and spiritual landscape. To understand the significance of the labyrinth, one must consider its relationship to Egypt's other great wonders, particularly the pyramids. which have long been considered the pinnacle of ancient Egyptian architectural achievement. The Great Pyramid of Giza, built for the pharaoh Khufu, stands as a testament to Egypt's power and the complexity of their religious and architectural systems. It is no surprise that Herodotus, when describing the labyrinth, would compare it to the pyramids, considering them both products of the same cultural and spiritual world. While the pyramids are often associated with the burial of kings and the afterlife, the labyrinth may have had a different function, yet equally steeped in symbolism. Theories suggest that the labyrinth was built as a temple complex dedicated not to one specific god, but to the broader cosmic forces of Egypt, incorporating the various gods and mythologies that govern the cycles of life, death, and rebirth. Like the pyramids, the labyrinth's design could have been tied to Egyptian cosmology. Ancient Egyptians believed in a complex, layered universe, one that blended the material and spiritual realms. The labyrinth, with its vast corridors and hidden chambers, could have symbolized the journey of the soul through the afterlife, much like the pyramids, which were designed as tombs to facilitate the pharaoh's passage into the next life. The comparison between the pyramids and the labyrinth suggests that both were not simply monumental feats of engineering, symbolic representations of life's great mysteries. Some scholars even propose that the labyrinth might have served a ritualistic function where initiates would go through a series of trials and spiritual experiences within its corridors, reflecting the journey of the soul through the underworld, a passageway to divine enlightenment, much like the spiritual journey that was symbolized by the pyramids. Moreover, Herodotus himself believed that the labyrinth had an intricate network of passages and chambers, similar in their complexity to the passages inside the pyramids. This idea suggests a deep architectural connection, a shared symbolic purpose to guide both the living and the dead through spaces that blurred the boundaries between the material world and the afterlife. Though the exact connection between the labyrinth and the pyramids remains unclear, one thing is certain: both structures embodied the grand vision of ancient Egypt, a civilization that looked beyond the physical world toward the mysteries of the cosmos and the eternal. The lost labyrinth of Egypt was not simply a structure built for practical purposes, like a palace or a marketplace. Its existence was shrouded in mystery, and the very design of the labyrinth suggests it was a place of profound spiritual and symbolic significance. It's a complex network of corridors and chambers. Its intricate layout and its scale all point to a deeper purpose, one that goes beyond mere architecture. Many theories suggest that the labyrinth was a sacred site, a place where ancient rituals and religious ceremonies were held. The labyrinth may have served as a temple complex dedicated to the worship of multiple gods, with the Egyptian pantheon of deities playing central roles in its design. The Egyptians were a deeply religious people, and their monuments often carried spiritual meaning, with each structure symbolizing different aspects of the afterlife, cosmic order, and the journey of the soul. One compelling theory is that the labyrinth was a representation of the afterlife itself. In ancient Egyptian belief, the journey to the afterlife was complex and treacherous. The soul of the deceased had to navigate the many challenges and obstacles that stood between it and the divine realm. The labyrinth, with its maze-like structure and hidden chambers, may have symbolized the trials and tribulations the soul had to endure in the afterlife, just as the deceased had to find their way through the winding passages of the labyrinth. They also had to navigate the journey through the underworld, guided by the gods and their faith. The labyrinth could also have been a ritualistic space where priests and initiates underwent spiritual tests and trials. Speculate that it was the site of ancient Egyptian mystery schools where sacred knowledge was imparted to chosen individuals. The initiates might have been led through the labyrinth in a carefully constructed ritual meant to mirror their journey of spiritual enlightenment. The idea of a physical labyrinth representing the journey of the soul is a powerful one, as it provides a direct connection between the physical world and the spiritual one, linking the ancient Egyptians' understanding of life, death, and rebirth. Another theory holds that the labyrinth was connected to astronomical alignments. The ancient Egyptians were keenly aware of the stars and celestial movements, which guided their agricultural calendar and religious practices. The labyrinth could have been built in alignment with the stars, with its passages and chambers reflecting the patterns of the night sky, perhaps mirroring the path of the sun or the journey of the soul through the stars. Whatever its true purpose, the lost labyrinth remains an enigma. Symbolism, its mysteries, and its profound connection to the ancient Egyptian worldview continue to captivate those who seek to uncover the secrets buried beneath the sands. For centuries, the lost labyrinth of Egypt has remained a mystery, buried beneath the shifting sands of time. But the fascination with this incredible structure has not waned. Archaeologists, historians, and explorers continue to search for the labyrinth, hoping that modern technology and renewed curiosity might finally reveal the secrets hidden beneath Egypt's vast desert. The search for the labyrinth has been a long and difficult one. Early explorers and archaeologists, using the limited tools of their time, sought in vain for the legendary site. In the 19th century, European expeditions ventured into the desert, particularly around the Fume Oasis and Lake Moeris, which Herodotus had indicated as the labyrinth's possible location. However, these early searches turned up little beyond scattered ruins and unclear remnants, enough to spark interest, but not enough to make any definitive discoveries. In the 20th and 21st centuries, the search for the labyrinth has gained new momentum thanks to advancements in technology. Satellite imagery, ground-penetrating radar, and modern excavation methods have provided fresh tools in the search for the lost wonder. With the help of aerial surveys and satellite imaging, researchers have been able to scan vast stretches of the desert where the labyrinth is thought to lie. Some scholars believe that beneath the sands there may still be hidden remains of massive stone structures, echoes of the great labyrinth Herodotus described. One of the key locations consistently linked to the labyrinth is the area around Lake Moeris and the Fume Oasis near the ancient city of Crocodilopolis. It was here, according to Herodotus and other ancient sources, that the labyrinth was constructed. The Fam region was a fertile oasis, and the area's importance in Egyptian civilization makes it a promising candidate for housing the labyrinth. Over the years, archaeologists have uncovered traces of ancient stone foundations and architectural remnants in this area, though they have yet to find definitive evidence of the labyrinth itself. In recent decades, there have been occasional reports of underwater ruins discovered in the area around Lake Moeris, sparking renewed interest in the site. Some experts believe that parts of the labyrinth may lie submerged beneath the lake, hidden by thousands of years of sediment and water. Others speculate that the labyrinth could be buried under a sand dune near the remnants of ancient Egyptian cities or temples. Despite these advancements, the labyrinth's discovery remains elusive, but the search is far from over. Each new excavation, every new scan of the desert brings with it a glimmer of hope that one day the lost labyrinth may emerge once again. Offering up its secrets to the modern world, the sands of Egypt may hold more than just a forgotten building. They may hold the keys to understanding the deep spiritual and architectural ingenuity of one of history's most remarkable civilizations. The search for the lost labyrinth is not just an archaeological quest. It's an attempt to uncover a hidden chapter of Egypt's history, a chapter that could dramatically alter our understanding of the ancient world. If the labyrinth is ever found, it will provide unprecedented insights into the architecture, legend, and daily life of one of the most advanced civilizations in history. One of the most tantalizing aspects of the labyrinth is the possibility that it holds ancient Egyptian knowledge that has been lost for millennia. The labyrinth, with its intricate corridors, chambers, and symbolic carvings, could be a repository of sacred texts or ritualistic knowledge. Some scholars speculate that it could contain documents that explain the deeper spiritual beliefs of the Egyptians, possibly shedding light on the mysteries of the afterlife the gods they worshipped, okay, and the rituals they performed to ensure the passage of the soul to the next world. If these texts or symbols were preserved within the labyrinth, they could offer a glimpse into Egypt's religious practices and rituals, revealing aspects of their civilization that have been obscured by time. The labyrinth might also offer new clues about how the ancient Egyptians viewed the cosmos and their understanding of the heavens, which played such a central it, bringing new revelations about the ancient Egyptian civilization and its place in the history of the world. For now, the labyrinth remains hidden, a shadow beneath the sands. But with every new piece of evidence uncovered, the possibility of finding it grows closer. The mysteries of the ancient world are still waiting to be unlocked, and the lost labyrinth may one day emerge from the shadows to reveal its secrets. The lost labyrinth of Egypt has long been seen as more than just a physical structure. Its symbolic significance, woven into the fabric of Egyptian culture, has echoed through history, influencing not only the myths of ancient Egypt, but also the narratives of later civilizations. Even in its absence, the idea of the labyrinth has continued to captivate the human imagination. In ancient Egypt, labyrinths were not just architectural marvels, they were symbolic representations of the journey of the soul. The maze-like structure of the labyrinth may have been designed to mirror the difficult path the deceased had to navigate to reach the afterlife. In Egyptian cosmology, the afterlife was a realm full of challenges, trials, and mysteries, where only the worthy would pass through the gates to eternal life. The labyrinth, with its many twists and turns, might have served as a metaphor for the soul's journey through these trials. The labyrinth's role in Egyptian culture was perhaps linked to the worship of Sabik, the crocodile god, whose temples were often placed in the Fiume region. Sabik was believed to be both a creator and a destroyer, a duality reflected in the labyrinth's ability to both guide and confound. The symbolism of a hidden, mysterious maze with its guarded secrets might have represented the dual nature of the divine, both nurturing and terrifying. But the influence of the labyrinth did not end with Egypt. As the centuries passed, the idea of the labyrinth spread across cultures and myths. The most famous of these myths is the story of the Labyrinth of Cree, designed by the legendary craftsman Daedalus. In Greek mythology, the labyrinth was built to house the Minotaur, a half-man, half-bull creature. This labyrinth, unlike the Egyptian version, was associated with confusion and entrapment, a place where only those lost within its walls could face destruction. Over time, the concept of the labyrinth evolved, taking on different meanings across cultures. In medieval Europe, the labyrinth became a symbol of the spiritual journey, often depicted in the floors of cathedrals as a path of prayer and meditation. Pilgrims would walk the labyrinth's intricate paths as a symbol of their own journey towards salvation. The idea of the labyrinth as a sacred space, a space that requires both wisdom and courage to navigate, transcended borders and cultures, connecting it to the broader human experience of seeking answers, truth, and enlightenment. The labyrinth's connection to both life and death, as well as its association with spiritual trials, ensures its place as a symbol that transcends time. Whether it was in Egypt, Greece, or later religious traditions, the labyrinth has remained a powerful metaphor for the complexities of the human soul and its struggle to find meaning and purpose. Though the lost labyrinth of Egypt remains hidden beneath the sands, its symbolic legacy continues to inspire and provoke thought. It reminds us that some mysteries, though buried, are timeless, waiting to be uncovered when the world is ready to understand their deeper meanings. The search for the lost labyrinth of Egypt is far from over, and with each passing year, new technologies and methods bring us closer to uncovering its hidden secrets. Though it has remained elusive for centuries, the labyrinth continues to captivate the imaginations of archaeologists and explorers alike, drawing attention to the mystery of this ancient wonder and the possibility of unlocking one of the greatest lost sites of Egypt. The region surrounding Lake Moeris and the Fume Oasis continues to be the primary focus of excavations. Many believe that the labyrinth lies buried somewhere near the ancient city of Crocodilopolis, a once thriving hub that was home to a temple dedicated to Sobek, the crocodile god. This location is central to the theories that placed the labyrinth in the Fume, as Herodotus himself made connections between the two in his writings. In recent decades, advanced technology has breathed new life into the search. Satellite imagery and ground-penetrating radar (GPR) have allowed researchers to explore areas previously inaccessible or unknown, providing new clues about what might lie beneath the surface. For thousands of years, the story of Egypt's lost labyrinth has drifted through time like a mirage. Ancient historians described it with awe, calling it one of the most breathtaking architectural feats ever created. Herodotus, writing in the 5th century BCE, claimed the labyrinth contained 12 vast courts surrounded by 3,000 rooms, half above ground and half below. Strabo, centuries later, wrote of its endless galleries and hidden passageways. Diodorus Siculus added his own account, describing halls that seemed to stretch without end. It's a place so complex that one could wander for days without finding the exit. To them, it was not legend. It was real. They saw it. They walked its halls. They recorded its wonders. And yet today, nothing remains. No pillars. No walls. No crumbled stones rising from the sand. It is as if the earth itself swallowed it whole. This disappearance has turned the labyrinth into one of history's greatest riddles. Did it truly exist, or was it exaggerated into myth? And if it did exist, where did it go? For centuries, scholars, adventurers, and dreamers have searched for answers. Some argue it was dismantled stone by stone, its materials stolen to build later monuments. Others claimed it was buried beneath layers of Nile silt as the river shifted its course. Still, others believe the desert winds and rolling dunes slowly consumed it, burying one of the world's wonders under an ocean of sand. But in the 21st century, new tools have given the search fresh life. Archaeology has moved beyond picks and shovels. Today, satellites can scan the ground from orbit, detecting subtle changes invisible to the naked eye. LiDAR can strip away the desert's surface to reveal what lies beneath. Ground-penetrating radar and magnetometry can trace buried walls, foundations, even hidden chambers, without disturbing a grain of sand. With these tools, the desert is no longer an impenetrable shroud. It has become transparent. In 2017, one such survey transformed speculation into possibility. Over the Fayum Oasis, a team of researchers conducted aerial and ground-based scans. What they discovered set the archaeological community buzzing. Beneath the sands, vast rectangular anomalies appeared, massive geometric shapes, far too precise to be natural. Their scale suggested structures of immense size, possibly walls or foundations. Could these be the skeletal remains of the labyrinth? The outlines of its fabled courts? The discovery electrified researchers, but also deepened the mystery. The anomalies were clear, yet excavation has not been possible on a large scale. The sands shift constantly, burying and revealing fragments of history, like the turning of a page. Every gust of wind rearranges the desert, concealing what technology only just glimpsed. And then there is Lake Maurice. In antiquity, this lake was vast, far larger than its modern remnant in the Fayum. Over thousands of years, it has expanded and contracted, reshaping the surrounding landscape. Some believe portions of the labyrinth now lie beneath its waters. True, the labyrinth's secrets may be entombed, not just under sand, but under silt and water, sealed away, untouched since the age of the pharaohs. Thought is haunting. Imagine grand halls, once filled with priests, scribes, and rulers, now drowned in silence. Passageways swallowed by water. Murals dissolved by time. Columns collapsed, yet preserved beneath layers of sediment. In a strange way, the lake may have protected what the desert could not. What lies beneath could be astonishingly intact, but there is more at stake than the labyrinth itself. Its rediscovery would reshape our understanding of ancient Egypt, for if Herodotus and Strabo were correct, the labyrinth was not just a monument, tenta, an administrative hub, perhaps even a tomb. Some accounts suggest its underground chambers housed the records of Egyptian dynasties, an archive of knowledge that could rewrite history. Imagine tablets, carvings, scrolls preserved in sealed halls, an entire lost library waiting in the dark. The implications are staggering. Still, archaeology is slow. The labyrinth will not be uncovered overnight. Funding, politics, and the sheer difficulty of excavating beneath shifting sands and changing waters have kept the site shrouded in uncertainty. Each discovery brings a flash of hope, but the definitive moment, when a spade finally strikes the stones of the labyrinth, has not yet come. And so, the labyrinth remains suspended between worlds. It is history and myth, evidence and speculation. A marvel described in precise detail, yet hidden from view. Perhaps it sleeps beneath dunes that rise and fall like waves. Perhaps it rests beneath the waters of Lake Morris, preserved in silence. Or perhaps, like so many wonders of the ancient world, it has been erased entirely, leaving only echoes in ancient texts. But the search continues. With every technological breakthrough, with every new survey, the labyrinth moves closer to revelation. And one day, perhaps soon, the desert will yield its secret. The lost labyrinth of Egypt will no longer be a story told by Herodotus or Strabo, but a living monument uncovered again, stone by stone. Until then, it remains one of history's greatest enigmas, a wonder described as more magnificent than the pyramids, yet hidden in silence for over 2 millennia. A monument waiting patiently beneath the shifting sands, reminding us that the earth still keeps secrets. And some of the greatest treasures of human history are still waiting to be found. The sands of Egypt may conceal the labyrinth, but the ingenuity required to build such a structure continues to all modern engineers and archaeologists alike. To conceive of a complex sprawling beneath the desert, comprising hundreds of chambers, corridors, and courtyards, would have demanded an unparalleled understanding of architecture, material strength, and spatial logic. It was a feat far beyond simple stone stacking. Some scholars speculate that the labyrinth's design employed principles that were remarkably advanced, for the time principles that would not be matched in other civilizations for centuries. According to Herodotus, the labyrinth was built with walls so immense that sunlight could barely penetrate the depths of some chambers. The stones themselves were described as perfectly fitted, massive blocks that bore inscriptions and carvings so intricate they seemed almost alive, depicting gods, pharaohs, and legendary creatures. To imagine this today is to imagine a city compressed into a single building, a monumental microcosm of Egyptian society, religion, and cosmic understanding. Some theories propose that the labyrinth's corridors were deliberately designed to be disorienting, not merely to create mystery, but as part of a spiritual journey, much like the pyramids, which symbolized the pharaoh's journey into the afterlife. The labyrinth may have been a terrestrial mirror of the cosmic journey. Each twist, each turn, might have corresponded to a step in the soul's passage through the underworld, a reflection of the Egyptian understanding of Met, the principle of balance and cosmic order. Initiates moving through the labyrinth would have encountered symbolic obstacles, potentially designed to challenge their understanding of life, death, and spiritual authority. The use of water channels within the labyrinth is a point of significant speculation. Some archaeologists suggest that subterranean canals may have existed to regulate temperature, prevent flooding, or serve ritual purposes. These channels, if they existed, might also have mirrored the Nile, itself a reminder that the river was not only a life-giving force, but a conduit between the earthly and divine realms. Others have posited that the labyrinth may have been connected to the seasonal flooding of Lake Moeris, with certain chambers becoming temporarily submerged, creating an experiential reflection of Egypt's cycles of life and death. Stone carvings within the labyrinth reportedly illustrated both myth and reality. Pharaohs were depicted in ceremonial garb, performing rites under the watchful eyes of deities. Scenes of animals, some real, some mythological, were carved with astonishing precision. Crocodiles, in particular, seem to have been central motifs honoring Sobek, the crocodile god, whose power symbolized both fertility and danger. The placement of these carvings may have been purposeful. Walls in certain corridors could have acted as visual guides, instructing initiates in the divine hierarchy, teaching lessons about obedience, devotion, and cosmic balance. The labyrinth scale, according to Herodotus, was almost unimaginable. 12 courtyards alone formed the heart of the structure, each lined with columns, statues, and inscriptions. Beyond these courtyards sprawled countless chambers and hidden passages, many of which may have been used for storage, religious ceremonies, or initiatory rites. The scale was so vast that one might spend days, even weeks, traversing its halls without fully encountering every room. Modern architectural historians marveled at the notion that ancient builders could achieve such precision without the benefit of cranes, modern surveying equipment, or reinforced concrete. One of the most striking hypotheses about the labyrinth's design concerns its possible astronomical alignments. The ancient Egyptians were meticulous observers of the stars, aligning their monuments with celestial events like solstices, equinoxes, and the heliacal rising of Sirius. It is conceivable that the labyrinth itself was aligned with specific constellations, or that certain chambers were positioned to receive the first rays of sunlight on significant festival days. If true, the labyrinth may have functioned as a celestial calendar, a physical manifestation of Egypt's intricate knowledge of the heavens. The symbolic weight of the labyrinth extends beyond religious or spiritual interpretations. It may also have been a political statement, a display of pharaonic power and ingenuity. To construct a building of such scale and intricacy would have required thousands of workers, master artisans, planners, and priests, all coordinated under a centralized authority. The labyrinth could have functioned as both a monument to divine kingship and a practical center for governance, storage, and ritual activity. It may have contained archives, records, and artifacts that chronicled the achievements of Egypt's rulers, making it a repository not only of spiritual knowledge, but of political memory. Despite its monumental scale, the labyrinth was also a site of mystery. Herodotus described it as being more wondrous than the pyramids, yet unlike the pyramids, it was not a tomb. It had no singular, final purpose. Instead, it was a living complex, a place of constant activity, learning, and spiritual exploration. Scholars have suggested that the labyrinth may have functioned as a mystery school, where priests instructed initiates in sacred knowledge and ritual practices. These teachings may have encompassed astrology, medicine, theology, and philosophia, comprehensive education rooted in both earthly and divine understanding. The use of hidden chambers and secret passages also points to a dual purpose, one for the initiated, but another to protect the sacred knowledge contained within. Ancient Egyptians were well aware of the risks of desecration and theft. The labyrinth may have been designed to confound would-be intruders while guiding the worthy along paths of enlightenment. This principle, the careful interplay of accessibility and secrecy, is a hallmark of Egyptian religious architecture, where the most sacred spaces were often the most difficult to reach. Modern comparisons have been drawn between the labyrinth and other complex ancient structures, such as the Greek labyrinth of Crete or the underground cities of Anatolia. While cultural contexts differ, these structures share a common theme, the intertwining of the practical and the mystical. In each case, architecture is not simply functional, it is symbolic, a means of shaping human experience, guiding behavior, and connecting mortals to the divine. Even today, the labyrinth continues to inspire awe, not only for its scale, but for its conceptual brilliance. To conceive of a building that blends function, ceremony, spirituality, and education is to glimpse the mind of an ancient civilization at the height of its intellectual and artistic prowess. Every stone placed, every corridor carved, every chamber designed was part of a holistic vision that tied together society, religion, and cosmology. As archaeologists continue to explore the deserts around Lake Morris and the Fayum Oasis, they are beginning to reconstruct the labyrinth in the digital realm. Advanced 3D mapping allows them to imagine the scale and layout, tracing Herodotus' descriptions against the terrain and ruins uncovered. Each anomaly in the sand becomes a potential doorway, each rectangular formation a possible courtyard, each shadowy depression a hidden chamber. The labyrinth, long lost, begins to emerge in the minds of modern explorers, a testament to both the ingenuity of the ancients and the persistence of human curiosity. And yet, despite all these insights, the labyrinth remains elusive. Its full extent is unknown. Scholars debate endlessly over the placement of its walls, the orientation of its corridors, and the purposes of its chambers. Some sections may lie forever, buried beneath centuries of sand or water. Others may have crumbled, leaving only faint traces of the grandeur that Herodotus so vividly described. Yet each discovery, no matter how small, adds a piece to the puzzle, bringing the labyrinth a little closer to the light of understanding. The labyrinth, therefore, is more than architecture. It is a symbol of human ambition, a bridge between the earthly and the divine, a testament to what a civilization can achieve when art, science, and spirituality converge. As researchers continue their quest, the labyrinth stands as both a challenge and an inspiration, a reminder that the pursuit of knowledge is as labyrinthine as the structure itself. Long after Herodotus' descriptions had passed into legend, the labyrinth became a phantom of history, an enigmatic monument whispered about by travelers, scholars, and later, treasure hunters. In antiquity, its very existence was questioned by some, dismissed as an exaggeration or myth. Yet others, particularly those who had journeyed along the Nile or ventured into the desert oases, reported vague sightings of colossal stonework or remnants of walls, hinting at a structure that defied ordinary comprehension. During the Roman period, accounts of the labyrinth persisted, though they grew more fragmented and intertwined with myth. Writers such as Strabo, the Greek geographer, mentioned tales of immense underground halls, chambers, and passages, noting their apparent connection to Egyptian religious practices. However, as centuries passed, the labyrinth faded further into obscurity. Political instability, invasions, and natural desertification made the area around Lake Morris and the Fayum Oasis increasingly remote and inhospitable. By the Middle Ages, any tangible memory of the labyrinth had been largely buried beneath shifting sands and the layers of time. It was until the Renaissance and the subsequent Age of Enlightenment that European scholars and explorers once again turned their attention to Egypt. Ancient texts, particularly those of Herodotus and later classical writers, became sources of fascination. The idea of a subterranean complex that rivaled or exceeded the grandeur of the pyramids captured the imagination of adventurers, architects, and historians alike. However, early expeditions were hampered by logistical challenges. The Egyptian desert was harsh, travel was slow, and maps of the region were often inaccurate. The labyrinth, if it existed, was not easily found. By the late 18th and early 19th centuries, Egyptology had begun to emerge as a formal discipline. Scholars like Jean-Francois Champollion, who deciphered the Rosetta Stone, laid the groundwork for understanding Egyptian hieroglyphs and, by extension, the inscriptions that might have adorned labyrinth walls. European interest in ancient Egypt reached a fever pitch during this period, fueled by Napoleon's Egyptian campaign and the subsequent publication of descriptions de l'Egypte, a monumental catalog of Egypt's monuments, flora, fauna, and people. These works rekindled interest in lost structures, such as the labyrinth. In the 19th century, British and French explorers mounted more organized expeditions into the Fayum region. Figures like John Gardner, Wilkinson, and Carl Richard Lepsius meticulously surveyed the landscape, quoting ruins, foundations, and anomalies that hinted at buried structures. Large rectangular foundations and scattered blocks of stone were occasionally uncovered, sparking speculation that they were remnants of the fabled labyrinth. Yet, none of these finds could be conclusively linked to Herodotus's description, and frustration mounted as the desert swallowed clues beneath its sands. Despite these setbacks, the fascination with the labyrinth never waned. Early explorers were driven not only by the desire to document Egyptian history, but also by a sense of adventure and the allure of legend. Some even pursued rumors that the labyrinth contained treasure or ancient texts of untold wisdom, possibly detailing secret knowledge of the gods, magic, or advanced engineering techniques lost to time. Letters, journals, and sketches from these explorers describe an almost obsessive effort to trace every ruin, map every anomaly, and follow every clue, ever slight, that might lead to the labyrinth. In the mid-19th century, archaeological methods began to improve. Tools for excavation became more systematic, and teams of workers were employed to carefully uncover ruins, layer by layer. The discovery of other ancient sites, such as the city of Thebes and the tombs in the Valley of the Kings, demonstrated that much could still be hidden beneath the desert. These successes provided hope that the labyrinth, too, could someday be uncovered. By the late 19th century, attention shifted more specifically to Lake Maurice and the surrounding oases. Historical records, combined with emerging geological studies, suggested that parts of the area had once been fertile and heavily populated, with water systems engineered to sustain large populations. Archaeologists hypothesize that the labyrinth, if real, might have served as both a monumental center of worship and an administrative hub, controlling access to the fertile lands and the Nile's water resources. Some even speculated that the labyrinth might be partially submerged beneath remnants of the ancient lake bed, its chambers hidden beneath silt and sediment. Excavations in the Fayum region during this period occasionally produced tantalizing hints. Large stone blocks, some inscribed with hieroglyphs and depictions of gods, were unearthed. Foundations that could have belonged to courtyards or ceremonial halls appeared in clusters. Yet, as often happened in archaeology, these discoveries were fragmentary. Without the full context of the labyrinth, scholars could only speculate on their significance. Were they part of Herodotus' legendary structure, or were they simply remnants of more ordinary temples and civic buildings? The line between fact and legend remained frustratingly thin. Pyle, it was during this time that modern myths about the labyrinth began to take shape. Writers and explorers embellished accounts, sometimes merging descriptions of the labyrinth with local tales, the stories of other ancient monuments, in their own imaginations. Articles in scholarly journals, travel memoirs, and popular books circulated across Europe, showing that the labyrinth remained a subject of fascination, both within academic circles and the broader public imagination. Despite centuries of speculation and excavation, the labyrinth remained elusive, hiding beneath layers of sand, time, and myth. Yet every failed attempt, every partial discovery, contributed to a growing understanding of the labyrinth's possible scale and significance. Archaeologists began to recognize that the structure, if real, was not merely a curiosity. It was a masterpiece of ancient design, a cultural and spiritual hub, and a testament to the engineering capabilities of the Middle Kingdom of Egypt. The labyrinth's continued mystery inspired a new generation of explorers who approached the search with improved methods and more systematic studies. Detailed mapping of the desert, geological surveys, and careful cataloging of ruins became central to the quest. Even failed excavations were valuable, as they helped narrow the potential locations and allowed researchers to refine their hypotheses. By the end of the 19th century, it was clear that the labyrinth's discovery would require patience, ingenuity, and, perhaps, a measure of luck. Part 4. Modern rediscovery efforts and the role of technology as the 20th century dawned. The quest for the lost labyrinth entered a new phase. Archaeology was evolving from a largely speculative and often haphazard endeavor into a scientific discipline. Excavators no longer relied solely on anecdotal accounts, local rumors, or the courage of a handful of explorers. Instead, teams of archaeologists began to combine careful mapping, stratigraphic excavation, and meticulous documentation with historical texts. Yet, the labyrinth remained elusive, hidden beneath layers of desert sand that shifted with every windstorm, sometimes swallowing entire ruins in a matter of years. The Fayum region, particularly near Lake Morris, became a focal point for modern expeditions. Researchers recognized that Herodotus' accounts, while invaluable, were not precise blueprints. He described courtyards, corridors, statues, and inscriptions, but these details required interpretation. Was he exaggerating the scale? Were some of his descriptions symbolic rather than literal? Archaeologists knew that to locate the labyrinth, they would need to combine textual analysis with cutting-edge technology, fusion of the humanities and the sciences. By the mid-20th century, aerial photography began to provide new perspectives. From the skies, large-scale formations could be observed that were impossible to detect from ground level. Fayum's desert, once an endless monotone of sand and stone, began to reveal patterns, faint lines, subtle depressions, and shadowed rectangles hinting at walls buried beneath centuries of sediment. These images were often tantalizingly ambiguous, yet they represented a significant leap forward in the hunt. Ground-penetrating radar, GPR, later revolutionized the search. This technology allowed researchers to detect anomalies beneath the surface without the need for destructive excavation. When radar waves encountered stone, brick, or voids, they reflected signals that could be analyzed to reveal buried structures. In some cases, formations that resembled the rectangular courtyards described by Herodotus appeared. The labyrinth, it seemed, might indeed be buried just beneath the shifting sands. In 2017, an aerial survey over the Fayum oasis provided what many believed to be a breakthrough. Large rectangular formations appeared on high-resolution satellite imagery, aligned in a manner consistent with descriptions of the labyrinth. While these anomalies could not yet be confirmed as ruins, they sparked renewed excitement in both academic circles and popular media. Archaeologists debated whether these structures were remnants of the labyrinth or part of more ordinary ancient settlements. Some suggested that the labyrinth, if it existed, could even extend beneath parts of Lake Morris itself, its chambers now submerged beneath water and silt. The possibility of a partially submerged labyrinth introduced new challenges. Underwater archaeology in the lake required divers and remote-operated submersibles, technologies that were only becoming viable in the 21st century. Sediment layers accumulated over millennia had the potential to preserve parts of the labyrinth, while simultaneously hiding others. Researchers speculated that some chambers might remain intact, almost perfectly preserved beneath the lake bed, offering a window into ancient Egyptian architecture, religious practice, and artistry. Modern efforts have also benefited from collaboration between multiple disciplines. Ecologists, hydrologists, historians, and archaeologists now work together to model the ancient environment. Satellite data, LiDAR scans, and GPR findings are combined with historical texts to reconstruct what the Fayum region may have looked like during the Middle Kingdom. These models suggest that Lake Morris was far larger in ancient times, with a complex network of canals, artificial islands, and settlements. The labyrinth may have functioned as a central hub, connecting temples, administrative centers, and sacred waterways in a manner that mirrored the Egyptians' cosmological beliefs. In addition to scientific expeditions, private exploration has played a surprising role. Enthusiasts, historians, and even amateur archaeologists, armed with drones, GPS mapping, and satellite access, have contributed observations and findings, though these are often controversial. Some of the most promising leads in recent years have come from individuals who cross-reference classical texts, local lore, and technological surveys, pointing out sites previously overlooked by traditional teams. While their work is occasionally met with skepticism, it highlights how modern tools have democratized the search for lost wonders. One of the most compelling aspects of modern research is the labyrinth's potential, symbolic, and spiritual significance. Scholars now argue that the labyrinth was not merely a practical or ceremonial structure, may have been a representation of the cosmos itself. Its intricate network of corridors, courtyards, and chambers might have mirrored the Egyptian belief in a layered universe, connecting the world of the living to the afterlife. Its astronomical alignments could have guided its design, with corridors and openings positioned to mark solstices, equinoxes, or the rising of key stars. The labyrinth may have served as both a physical and spiritual map, guiding initiates through a ritualized journey of enlightenment, much as the pyramids themselves encoded sacred knowledge into stone. Despite centuries of effort, the labyrinth remains tantalizingly hidden. Yet each discovery, however small, brings researchers closer to understanding its possible scale, purpose, and significance. Traces of walls, foundations, and inscriptions are slowly pieced together, offering tantalizing glimpses of a structure that may have surpassed even Herodotus' description in complexity and grandeur. The labyrinth's mystery continues to captivate not only scholars, but also the public imagination. It has inspired books, documentaries, and speculative fiction, cementing its place as one of the enduring enigmas of human history. Yet, beyond myth and legend, the labyrinth is also a tangible archaeological puzzle, a challenge to the ingenuity, patience, and perseverance of those who dare to uncover it. Part 5. Hypotheses, Theories, and Ongoing Expeditions as the 21st century progressed. The search for Egypt's lost labyrinth became a sophisticated interplay of archaeology, technology, and historical detective work. Scholars, explorers, and enthusiasts alike grappled with one of the most tantalizing questions in Egyptology. Was the labyrinth still largely intact? Or had millennia of desert storms, floods, and human activity reduced it to mere fragments? Technological frontiers and exploration. Modern technology has opened avenues previously unimaginable to earlier generations of archaeologists. Satellite imaging, for instance, allows researchers to detect subtle variations in soil composition and terrain elevation, revealing potential human-made structures buried beneath vast stretches of sand. Even minor depressions or unnatural patterns in the landscape can hint at walls, courtyards, or chambers. Ground-penetrating radar (GPR) has become one of the most critical tools in this quest. By sending radio waves into the ground and analyzing their reflections, GPR can reveal anomalies that may indicate stone foundations or voids, hints of hidden chambers. In certain cases, researchers have identified rectangular formations resembling the courtyards described by Herodotus. Yet radar alone cannot confirm these as parts of the labyrinth. Excavation and cross-referencing with historical sources are essential. Drones equipped with LiDAR and multispectral sensors have further enhanced the search. From high above, these devices can penetrate the desert canopy, providing detailed topographical maps that reveal the faint traces of structures, roads, and canals. Aerial surveys over the Fayum oasis have consistently shown anomalies that align with the ancient texts' descriptions of courtyards and interconnected passageways. Submerged mysteries in Lake Moeris. One of the most intriguing modern hypotheses concerns Lake Moeris. Historical and geological research indicates that this lake, far larger in antiquity, may have submerged parts of the labyrinth. Sediment layers, shifting water levels, and centuries of flooding could have hidden chambers beneath the lake bed, preserving them in near-perfect condition. Underwater archaeology has become a promising, though complex, frontier. Using remote-operated submersibles and sonar mapping, researchers can scan beneath the lake's surface without disturbing delicate sediment. Early sonar scans have hinted at rectangular formations on the lake bed, possible foundations of walls or chambers. Some experts speculate that if these submerged sections are explored fully, they might reveal intact carvings, statues, or inscriptions, offering a rare glimpse into ancient Egyptian religious and ceremonial practices. Theories about the labyrinth's purpose. Scholars continue to debate the labyrinth's function, while some argue it was primarily a temple complex dedicated to Sobek, crocodile god associated with the Nile and fertility. Others propose a more multifaceted role, religious and ritual significance. The labyrinth may have served as a ceremonial space where priests conducted sacred rituals and initiates underwent spiritual trials. Its winding corridors could have symbolized the journey of the soul, reflecting the challenges of the afterlife and the Egyptian cosmological vision of a layered universe. Administrative hub. Some researchers theorize the labyrinth was an administrative center, housing offices, storerooms, and record-keeping chambers. Its proximity to Lake Morris in the fertile Fayum region suggests it could have been integral to agricultural management, taxation, and governance. Astronomical alignment. Ancient Egyptians were keen astronomers, and some hypothesize the labyrinth's layout corresponds to celestial patterns. Corridors and courtyards may have been aligned with solstices, equinoxes, or the rising of significant stars, embedding the cosmos into the very design of the labyrinth. Cultural repository, given the inscriptions, statues, and carvings described by Herodotus. The labyrinth may have functioned as a repository of knowledge, chronicling the lineage of pharaohs, mythological tales, and religious doctrines. If intact sections survive, they could illuminate aspects of Egyptian society that are otherwise lost to history. Ongoing expeditions and collaborative efforts. Excavations in the Fayum region have become increasingly collaborative, involving teams from Egypt, Europe, and the United States. Multidisciplinary approaches combine archaeology, geology, hydrology, and even drone mapping to pinpoint promising locations. Some of the most ambitious modern projects involve mapping the lake bed and surrounding desert simultaneously. Archaeologists and engineers use LiDAR to identify subtle desert formations, while sonar and sediment analysis scan the lake's underwater terrain. Early findings suggest that large structures, potentially courtyards or walls, might lie partially buried under sand or sediment, awaiting excavation. Community engagement has also grown. Local populations, historically the custodians of oral traditions and legends about the labyrinth, have provided valuable insights. These narratives, passed down through generations, sometimes contain hints about ruins, hidden chambers, or unusual terrain features that correspond with satellite and radar data. The symbolic significance beyond its physical presence. The labyrinth holds immense symbolic weight. Achaia, it represents the ingenuity and ambition of ancient Egypt, a civilization that combined practical engineering with spiritual understanding. Its complexity, both architectural and ritualistic, reflects a worldview that intertwined life, death, and the cosmos. The labyrinth's maze-like passages echoed the human experience, a journey filled with obstacles, mysteries, and revelations. Even in modern times, the labyrinth inspires a sense of wonder. It reminds us that human ambition can create structures of astonishing scale and meaning, structures that survive millennia as mysteries awaiting discovery. The ongoing search reflects not just curiosity, but reverencia, recognition that the labyrinth may contain insights into spirituality, governance, and human ingenuity that transcend time. It's a continuing mystery. Despite technological advances and decades of research, the labyrinth remains hidden. Shifting sands, centuries of erosion, and incomplete historical records keep its exact location uncertain. Every discovery, from aerial anomalies to submerged foundations, brings tantalizing clues, Yet the full extent of the labyrinth continues to elude scholars. What remains clear is that the labyrinth is more than a collection of stone walls or chambers. It is a testament to human ambition, a bridge between the material and spiritual worlds, and a symbol of the mysteries that civilizations leave behind. Its discovery could reshape our understanding of ancient Egypt, providing unprecedented insights into architecture, religion, governance, and cultural expression. For now, the lost labyrinth of Egypt endures as both a historical enigma and a beacon for exploration. Its corridors, chambers, and courtyards lie buried beneath sand and water, challenging modern explorers to piece together the past from fragments, texts, and technological traces. The labyrinth invites those who dare to search not only to uncover stone and inscriptions, but to engage with the imagination, and spirituality of a civilization that thrived thousands of years ago. Part 6. Recent expeditions, breakthroughs, and future prospects. The quest for Egypt's lost labyrinth has never been static. With each passing decade, advances in technology, combined with renewed scholarly interest, have pushed the search into new realms, both physically and conceptually. Where early explorers relied on dusty journals, rudimentary maps, and the vague accounts of Herodotus, today's archaeologists wield satellite imaging, ground-penetrating radar, and even underwater drones, rediscovering the Fayum Oasis. The Fayum Oasis, with its fertile soils and ancient waterworks, has long been considered the most probable location for the labyrinth. Archaeologists believe that this region, historically known as Crocodilopolis, offered both practical and symbolic advantages: proximity to water, rich agricultural lands, and a spiritual connection to Sobek, the crocodile god, protector of the Nile and fertility. In recent years, systematic surveys have mapped large swaths of the oasis, revealing anomalies that hint at buried structures, rectangular formations, faint depressions in the desert floor, and unusual alignments all suggest the presence of man-made constructions. Many of these features correspond roughly to Herodotus's descriptions: 12 courtyards surrounded by towering walls, interconnected chambers, and passageways that could hide entire communities. Some of the most promising discoveries involve previously overlooked subterranean voids. Ground-penetrating radar has revealed large cavities beneath sand dunes that, if excavated, could match the dimensions of the labyrinth's inner chambers. Each new scan excites researchers, though the fragile desert environment complicates excavation, requiring careful planning to prevent structural collapse or erosion. Submerged sections in Lake Maurice. The theory that part of the labyrinth lies beneath Lake Maurice has gained increasing support. Geological studies show that the lake's boundaries shifted significantly over millennia. Ancient texts suggest that water management projects, including canals and reservoirs, were central to the labyrinth's design, perhaps linking ceremonial and practical uses. Underwater exploration of Lake Maurice has revealed intriguing possibilities. Sonar scans have detected large, rectangular anomalies under layers of sediment, potentially matching Herodotus's description of immense stone courtyards. Remote-operated submersibles have begun preliminary investigations, revealing formations that could be walls, stairways, or even ceremonial platforms. If confirmed, these submerged sections would not only preserve portions of the labyrinth in extraordinary condition, but also offer unparalleled insight into ancient Egyptian engineering and ritual practices. Waterlogged environments slow erosion and preserve organic materials, meaning that texts, carvings, and wooden artifacts long lost elsewhere might survive in the lakebed. Interdisciplinary collaboration. Modern archaeology is no longer a solitary pursuit. Multidisciplinary teams now combine the expertise of historians, engineers, geologists, hydrologists, and even computer scientists to interpret complex data. Artificial intelligence is being deployed to analyze satellite imagery, detect patterns invisible to the human eye, and cross-reference these findings with historical texts and maps. This collaborative approach has led to the identification of several potential labyrinth sites near the Fayoum oasis. By comparing ground scans with historical accounts, researchers can prioritize excavation sites more likely to yield significant results. This method reduces both costs and environmental impact, critical considerations in an area as fragile as the Egyptian desert. Cultural significance and ritual interpretations beyond its architectural grandeur. The labyrinth's symbolic and spiritual significance continues to captivate scholars. Many researchers suggest that the labyrinth was not merely a temple or administrative center, but a sacred space designed to mirror the spiritual journey of the soul. Its maze-like corridors may have been intentionally confusing, creating a ritualistic experience where priests, initiates, or visitors symbolically navigated the challenges of life, death, and the afterlife. Some experts propose that the labyrinth may have functioned as a site for initiatory rituals, similar in concept to mystery schools found elsewhere in the ancient world. Initiates could have been guided through its complex passageways, encountering symbolic obstacles and chambers that represented trials of courage, wisdom, and faith. These spiritual exercises may have been designed to prepare individuals for leadership, religious roles, or even as a metaphorical journey toward enlightenment. The labyrinth's alignment with astronomical phenomena also remains a compelling theory. Certain corridors and chambers may have been oriented to solar or stellar events, integrating the cosmos into the architectural design. Ancient Egyptians were meticulous astronomers, and aligning sacred structures with celestial events reflected a worldview in which earthly and divine realms were intimately connected. The future of the search for the labyrinth, is far from complete, yet each technological advancement brings us closer. Researchers anticipate that the next decade could see breakthroughs in several key areas. Underwater excavation. Advanced submersible technologies may finally allow safe exploration of the lakebed, revealing submerged chambers, inscriptions, or artifacts. AI and remote sensing. Machine learning algorithms could uncover hidden patterns in satellite imagery or radar data, pointing to previously overlooked sites. Preservation techniques. Innovations in archaeology will allow the delicate excavation of sand and water-buried structures without damaging fragile remains. Collaborative international efforts. Partnerships between Egyptian authorities and international research teams will combine expertise, funding, and technology to maximize the chances of discovery. The labyrinth, hidden for millennia, represents more than an archaeological challenge. It embodies the ingenuity, spirituality, and ambition of a civilization that sought to link life, death, and the cosmos through extraordinary architecture. If rediscovered, it promises to reshape our understanding of ancient Egypt, revealing insights into religion, governance, culture, and engineering. Enduring mystique. Even today, the labyrinth inspires imagination and scholarship alike. It connects us to an ancient world where human creativity, spiritual pursuit, and technical skill converged. Each stone, each corridor, each potential chamber, buried beneath sand or water, carries stories that may forever change our perception of history. The Lost Labyrinth is more than an architectural enigma. It is a bridge across time, inviting modern explorers to step into the mysteries of a civilization that continues to fascinate, challenge, and inspire. The sands of Egypt hold their secrets tightly, yet hope persists. With every scan, every excavation, and every historical insight, the labyrinth edges closer to revelation. And so, the quest continues, driven by curiosity, technology, and a deep respect for the past. The labyrinth, once described as more magnificent than the pyramids themselves, waits patiently beneath the desert and the lake, a timeless testament to human ingenuity and spiritual vision. Its full story remains untold, but the promise of discovery fuels the ongoing journey, one that may, someday, finally illuminate the labyrinth in its entirety.